In 2019, suicide was the leading cause of death for Asian American youth, unlike any other racial group. But everywhere you look, you see and hear the same story: hardworking Asian Americans who are naturally smart and successful. Why are these two stories so drastically different?
People ask me, what does it mean to you to be an Asian American and Pacific Islander, and what does it mean to you to be an Asian American and Pacific Islander elected official? And what I say to people, quite honestly, is it still means that in many places I'm invisible.
Invisibility. Being looked at without ever being seen. Asian Americans don't receive the same support as other racial or ethnic groups, not because they aren't struggling, but because their struggles go unnoticed. Attorney General William Tong, the first Asian American elected to statewide office in Connecticut, confronts ignorance every day, even in the legislature.
And I was talking about people of color, and he asked me, well, do Asian Americans count as people of color? And it was just a good reminder as I was speaking to this legislator during a live debate. You don't even see me, right? Meaning you may see a person standing here, but you don't see how hard it was for my family to immigrate here. You don't know anything about our experience. You know nothing about our culture and what we bring and contribute to our community here. That's what I mean. That in many cases being an Asian American means being invisible.
Unfortunately, the belief that Asian Americans don't count as people of color or as a marginalized group is a common one. Because of this, racial issues faced by AAPI groups are not taken seriously.
In the absence of that, stereotypes reign. And that leads to greater vulnerability, and Asian Americans can more easily be dismissed when stereotypes are formed and define those communities. And it also means that when they do experience challenge and hardship, that it's not well understood.
That's why people get hurt. If you're invisible and people don't see you, then they don't worry about what happens to you.
But the data shows us that, while the struggles of Asian Americans might be invisible, they are very real. AAPI youth experience higher suicide rates. 32% of AAPI adults reported being afraid of physical attacks or threats in 2021, higher than any other racial or ethnic group. So many Asian Americans face fear, violence, racism, and harmful stereotypes every day, yet they suffer in silence. Because they are invisible, they are expected to stay unseen and unheard. This creates a stigma and a pressure within the community. Don't speak up, don't ask for help.
I remember telling my dad that I wanted to explore a diagnosis for ADHD because I had the symptoms. It was affecting my academics. It was affecting the way that I live. And he basically told me that he couldn't raise a broken child. That wasn't something that he could do. Which is unfortunate, and it just kind of speaks to the stigma that our community has around neurodivergency and focusing on mental health.
Haritha's experience with stigma and mental health is not unique. For many Asian Americans, the cost of invisibility is an emotional one. It causes young people to be ashamed of their identity, feeling ostracized and never really fitting in. This is the experience of Devani Do, a Vietnamese refugee who fled to the US when she was just a teenager.
But a lot of time I came home and, just want to hide under my bed and not go to school because I knew I'm going to be making fun of or couldn't speak English and people don't understand me. So there's moment where you feel like you are so strong, and then the next moment you feel like you're so small or you don't want to do anything.
Devani Do felt like an outsider in school, and the constant teasing from people who didn't understand her culture made her feel hopeless. This kind of alienation leads to erasure, when parts of a person's identity are stripped away in order to fit in. William Tong shared a story of a Korean American friend who encouraged him to change his last name before running for state office.
And he said, maybe you should run as William Hotchkiss. And I said, why would I do that? And he said, well, because then you can hide the fact that you're Asian. And I said, Pete, look at me. I'm quite sure they know.
Attorney General Tong was told to erase a part of his identity by someone who is also Asian. His friend Pete thought being Asian was something to hide, not celebrate. When an entire group of people is invisible, their struggles are not noticed and they never truly feel like they belong. This leads to shame, isolation, and the pressure to hide who you are instead of speaking up about what's important to you.
Some students go to school every day and never once see themselves in a textbook, never get counted in a report, never have a teacher who knows their history. For Asian American and Pacific Islander students in Connecticut, that invisibility is not an accident. It is built into the systems meant to support them. This is their story.
It's two sides of the coin, right? On one side, we are considered the mono minority. And when we believe that we are the mono minority, then those of us who are struggling then don't get the services that we need. On the other side of that coin is the idea that we are these perpetual foreigners, that we all hail from these other countries and that we are all immigrants.
These stereotypes don't just affect how students feel in the classroom. They shape the decisions adults make about who needs help and who doesn't. When a student is assumed to be succeeding, schools stop looking closely. And when schools stop looking closely, the data reflects that assumption instead of reality.
32.3% of the school population is identifying as AAPI. But then when we look at, and I just pulled out an example, of chronic absenteeism, we're not there. And when you look at further digging to find disaggregated data, there's Asian numbers available, but we're not included in the whole report. And so a lot of our stories get erased from the data.
A quote from the National Schools Board Association explains how the absence of data related to AAPI students allows the disregard of Asian American students' disabilities to become an invisible pattern. The gap isn't only in how schools track their students, it's also in what those students are taught. Across Connecticut, state law now requires that AAPI history be included in school curricula, a step forward. But a requirement on paper doesn't guarantee students actually encounter these stories. That depends on whether the people standing in the front of the classroom feel equipped to tell them.
I would like to see that there's more training in teachers so that they can effectively teach the curriculum and give a voice to these communities that have been neglected for so long.
These students aren't invisible because they're hard to find. They're invisible because the systems around them stop looking. And there are more AAPI students than ever. A community projected to surpass 35 million by 2060, and each one is deserving to be counted, to be taught their history, and to have a teacher who knows how to reach them. Every student deserves to be seen. In the data, in the classroom, in the stories their schools decide are worth telling. But for so many AAPI students, that never happens. They sit in classrooms where their history is missing. They get left out of the reports that are supposed to track whether they're okay. And because the systems around them assume they're fine, no one thinks to ask. But that silence has a cost.
Our section looks at how social media can reinforce stereotypes and make some groups feel like they're being ignored. We focus on what happens when certain groups and voices are pushed aside or misinterpreted online. When people don't see themselves reflected accurately, it can feel like they just don't matter. We want to show that this isn't just something that happens on a screen. It has real effects on how people see themselves and how they are treated. At the end of the day, everyone deserves to be seen, heard, and represented.
And also what happens, that I'll lastly mention, is like the perpetuation of model minority, right? If Asians aren't listed as experiencing chronic absenteeism, which is why I put chronic absenteeism, that's because they're the model exemplary perfect student. But we do have Asian students that struggle in the state that do deserve to have their needs addressed, but you just wouldn't know that.
Being called a model student might sound like a compliment, but can actually hide a lot of what someone is going through. For many Asian American students, there's an expectation to always succeed and never struggle. Social media often reinforces this by constantly showing the same image of Asian students as naturally smart and hardworking. But not every student has the same experience, and many deal with stress, pressure, and mental health challenges that people don't notice. When everyone assumes you're doing fine, it can feel like your struggles are invisible. Learning to speak up and ask for help takes a lot of strength and reminds you that you are more than any stereotype. Feeling misunderstood or overlooked can be a large issue for many students. Finding comfort in cultural traditions can provide a sense of belonging and help them stay connected to their roots. Sometimes, culture can be turned into trends, stereotypes, or something to be marketed online. But culture means much more than that. It carries memories, traditions, and connects people to who came before us. Sharing a meal can feel like coming home. It's a moment where you don't have to explain yourself or prove where you belong. You can simply be surrounded by people who understand you and the stories who shaped who you are. When we look at data about Asian American graduates as if they are one single group, we are missing out on the full story. It connects directly to the model minority myth because the overall numbers can make it seem like every Asian American student is succeeding, which is far from the truth. Different communities have very different experiences, and some face significant barriers that are hidden when all the data is grouped together. This creates the same kind of invisibility we've talked about throughout this presentation. Just like social media often pushes one narrow image of what it means to be Asian American, combined statistics can erase the struggles and achievements of people whose stories do not fit that stereotype. Looking more closely at the data helps us see individuals as not just averages, but reminds us that every student deserves to be recognized for their own unique journey.
People bring their own lens or bias, right, or stereotype. So I think that's where people start first. They think, oh, AAPI students are quiet and you're super smart, and we put all these generalizations or stereotypes upon them. And AAPI students were just like any other student or kid, right? Like sometimes they're robust and vibrant, sometimes they might be quiet, but we make assumptions based on the media, based on the movies, based on books that we read, and we put all these students and pigeonhole it into one category and make them, as we say sometimes, the model minority.
The effects of being ignored or stereotyped are real, but they don't determine who you are. In many cases, these experiences push people to become stronger and more confident in themselves. Speaking up in a world that tries to put you in a box takes courage. Resilience is not just about getting through difficult experiences. It is about using them to grow and prove that you are more than just any label that is ever placed on you.
The barriers faced by AAPI groups across our country cannot be broken down overnight. But understanding the issue is just the first step. Some changes have been made in the right direction. Connecticut now mandates that AAPI history be offered in schools and worked into the curriculum, but we still have a long way to go.
Connecticut is the only state in the entire country, the last time I checked, that requires and offers the ability for all students to learn about each other's cultures. But that shouldn't be the standard. That's the flaw.
Education is a vital part of the solution. It not only keeps AAPI history alive and brings awareness to overlooked issues, but it can also dispel stereotypes and misconceptions, like the model minority myth, that cause harm to minority groups. However, just offering AAPI studies as an isolated elective course might not be the most effective.
You need to know more than just the mainstream, something about mainstream history, and something about your own racial ethnic history. That will prepare you to live in a multicultural, multiracial society.
Reverend Joseph Chia, an expert on race and religion, advocates for a different kind of education.
What we need as a class, where students can learn something about how different racial ethnic groups, their experiences, how they're intertwined. And this can be done.
If standard history courses took Father Chia's approach, focusing on how the histories of different minority groups are connected to one another, it could build solidarity and reduce the isolation that many students of color feel.
But beyond numbers and curriculums, students need community to feel like they truly belong. Alan Tan, a CT State Commissioner who advocates for underrepresented communities, faced relentless bullying throughout school. He told us how different his experience was when he made it to UConn.
Because at that point I was able to meet people at the Asian American Cultural Center and realize that, that other people like me, and that the experience I had in the K-12 isn't necessarily the experience we want children to have.
A cultural club or organization can be the difference between a student feeling ostracized and invisible and feeling confident in their identity. It can help reduce the shame and pressure to erase themselves that AAPI youth sometimes face. These clubs don't just benefit Asian students, they benefit everyone.
Groups of people that you've established that you can connect with, and like you mentioned, your friend groups. I think those types of groups that you can be with on the daily and talk like freely and not hold anything back. Those are the places that you can find you can be yourself and the best self that you can be.
This kind of community and solidarity is important beyond just the school system. Without it, anger and even violence can erupt. The 1992 LA Uprising, one of the most intense examples of racial tensions and violence in recent memory. The media painted the outbreak as a racial conflict between Black and Korean communities, who were just too different to understand each other.
So how did we move forward? The truth is, these two communities are not so different and face the same economic disadvantages. Through presentations and conversations, Hapen Im, founder of Faith and Community Empowerment, closed the gaps between the two communities and built solidarity. Jenny Heikkila Diaz, an educator and AAPI advocate who witnessed the events of 1992 firsthand, echoes this hope for the future through solidarity.
How do we help each other learn about each other better, learn our joint histories better together, so that we see that we're actually on the same team and that we have a future together, and we have it today together too.
The best thing about America is that every voice has to count, and we are a diverse community. And if our diversity is not celebrated, then we lose the blessing that we have. And then there's so much history, so much background to the Asian Pacific American communities that we are not serving our communities well if we don't have the inclusion of those voices.
The most common advice we received from everyone we interviewed was to tell your story. In order to move forward, in order to make Asian Americans visible and reverse decades of shame and stigma, our voices need to be heard. In order to make us count, we need to tell our stories and become leaders who advocate loudly for change, even when most people expect silence.
I would tell AAPI students that they should make a difference. And making a difference is not something you can do comfortably.
It might not be easy, but speaking up isn't just about Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Progress and visibility benefits all racial and ethnic groups across our country.
That resonates with Italian Americans and Irish Americans and Jewish Americans and Russian Americans and people that come from all over the globe, Haitian Americans. All of them in some way or another share a piece of this story. And so my advice is lean into who you are.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets rang their bombs were singing.
To help us process what we just saw, please welcome our panel facilitator, Dr. Batchelor, and student representative from across the two schools.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, so that was a great documentary, and we are here to continue the discussion. I'm sure that you have many questions and many comments, so please write them down so that we can hear from you. First, I'm going to have our Simsbury and Farmington High students introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Claire. I'm a junior from Farmington High School, and I'm really excited to be here.
Hi, my name is Krithi. I'm also a junior from Farmington.
Hi, my name is Maya. I'm a junior from Simsbury High School. I'm really happy to be here.
Hi, my name is Dhruti Malavarpu. I'm a senior here at Simsbury High School.
Hi, my name is David, and I'm also a junior here at Simsbury High School.
Thank you. And again, I'm Dr. Tyarisha Batchelor, the Director of Equity and Access from Simsbury Public Schools. Okay. So the first question, Dhruti, I'm going to ask you to start us off. What moment of the story during the documentary resonated with you most, and why?
I worked on this documentary. It was a huge part of my school year here, and it was my last year. It was a great opportunity that I really appreciate, and the biggest part for me was probably doing all the interviews. I really liked talking to Attorney General Tong, which you've seen in the interview. He was this great prominent figure that had great character, and he had so much experience and stories to tell me. I loved his story about his friend Pete, who wanted him to change his name to William Hotchkiss instead of William Tong to hide the fact that he's Asian. It was a really funny story when I was in the studio. And it just really spoke to the experience that these big, prominent members of the community who are now politicians can go through something as crazy as that, where they feel like they need to hide themselves and feel invisible, even though they're this huge figure that it makes such like a big movement on people in Connecticut. It's crazy that they can feel so hidden and seen when they're the most important people out there.
Thank you, and especially people feeling invisible in their own spaces that they dominate. Mm-hmm. So thank you for sharing that. Would someone else like to share what resonated with them during the documentary?
Yeah, I think the model minority myth definitely resonated with me a lot. I think definitely as an AAPI student, I can relate to the experience, and I think it was really jarring to hear a lot of the statistics, especially brought up by Megan Baker, I think it was, and then also the absentee rates. So it really brought light to this issue that definitely faces a lot of students.
For me, I thought it was really interesting to see the different statistics regarding different people of different ethnicities within the AAPI community, because I think that it's really important to acknowledge that while we might all see ourselves as Asian Americans, that is a really diverse body, and there are so many different cultures and traditions that are associated with that. And it's really cool to see how every group, while we're all Asian American, does have its differences, and it's important to acknowledge that as well.
I thought that the juxtaposition between that statistic with the suicide rate at the beginning and then the model minority stereotype was really, unfortunately, interesting because it kind of goes to show how even though these Asian Americans are seen as kind of the ideal minority or doing what they quote unquote should be doing, that can place a lot of pressure on them that can ultimately have these really detrimental and tragic results.
So I thought it was pretty interesting to see how all the, at least in the documentary, the Asian Americans were grouped into one category, even though it goes so much deeper than just that one category. There's so many different categories of Asian Americans, and seeing how they were all grouped into one, it goes to show how it is a problem and that it needs to be addressed.
So I heard each of you share something that resonated with me, and part of that is thinking about representation and why our individual representation matters, our group representation, and also being a part of a group. Why do you think representation matters for students and for school communities? And I'll ask Maya to start us off with that question.
I think representation really matters because I think that it's really important for people to see a kind of positive representation of a lot of these like Asian American communities to kind of combat some of the negative stereotypes that exist against them. Because I know that especially those main two that were mentioned in the documentary, the perpetual foreigner and model minority stereotypes, those two stereotypes are really perpetuated in a lot of mainstream media even to this day. So I think positive representation in all facets of life is really important to sort of combat that negative image that a lot of people might have developed without even realizing it.
I think that representation is especially important for building a sense of trust and belonging amongst students, especially within schools, but I think within life in general. Whether that's seeing like a positive representation of your specific ethnicity or whatever it is within your environment, that definitely prompts a lot of trust and belonging within students to feel like their opinions matters, and also cultivating a more like equitable environment for students.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Trust is really important, and I think that a lot of the stereotypes and assumptions that occur are usually out of ignorance or just not having enough exposure and awareness of these different experiences and communities. And so I think that by having more representation and having that really be a focus can allow for that trust and that connection to build.
Well, I think my panel partners touch on a lot of really important topics, but I think the main importance of representation is making sure every single group is counted, which is what representation really is to its core. I think it's just important to identify stories and how every story is different, and no matter what background you come from, you do have a story to share to everybody, and it's important that you honor that and you continue building your story and your legacy.
You guys all made really good points. I would say that representation matters because each student can feel safe in an environment that they feel that they're represented in. And I think the representation that an environment would give them would be the enabler for them to feel safe, with whether it's with an adult or with other students in that area. So I think it helps.
So we often talk about representation and how and why representation matters. A big part of representation is not just to be there, but to be seen, heard, feel valued, and feel a sense of belonging. So I'm gonna have Claire start the next question off with, what helps students feel like they truly belong in a school community?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for students is having a safe space where they're able to connect with other people that they relate to and they share experiences with, whether that's through events like this one, school clubs, other activities like that. And I think it's really important, not just for students who see people that they relate to, but also so that students can learn more about other cultures and other experiences that they might not have as much familiarity with. And I think that that's really helpful to helping everyone feel like they belong and feeling like they're in a community where they can learn without judgment and share with each other.
Yeah, I really like the note you touched on, especially with deferring perspectives. I think that's truly what allows students, when having the courage to maybe share your own opinion if it strays away from the norm or what most other people in your environment would be thinking, and having the courage to share that, because while it might seem scary in the moment, the results of being able to share your different opinions and perspectives with other students is really what will in turn create for a more represented school environment.
Thank you. David, would you like to share more about what helps students feel that they truly belong in their school environments?
So I think students can see that one, representation, like we mentioned before, can definitely help students feel seen. And I also think that acknowledging these problems and things like this event that we're having now can also help students feel seen, because it addresses the problems that some of the students might be feeling personally and physically. So I think that's a big factor in helping students feel seen.
Okay, and so our next question, Jordi's going to start. Now let's talk about storytelling. So we talk about representation, belonging. Storytelling is part of that. So how can storytelling help people better understand your lived experiences?
So I touched on this a little bit before, but this documentary really was a story. It was a culmination of several stories that I got to experience. I went to a Lunar New Year event run by APAC, which is the Asian American and Pacific Islander Coalition here in Connecticut. It was a great event. I got to talk to so many different kinds of people with so many different kinds of stories. I got to talk to different politicians, UConn students, and just high school students in general around Connecticut. And it was just a culmination of so many different stories, and it really made our documentary what it is today. Because I think without their stories, our documentary wouldn't really come to anything, because their stories really shaped the Asian American experience and what Asian Americans really dealt with growing up in Connecticut, and their experience coming to Connecticut and living their lives here.
Sure. So I wanted to share a story about the focus group discussion that we had prior to this event being held. I think it was really nice being able to share all of our personal stories and how we've all faced different things and relate to each other with what we faced, and see how each one of those can have impacted us and can continue to impact us, seeing how all of those things have an effect on more than just us, but also all the people around us.
I think that individual stories are really important to see like a variety of perspectives from especially the Asian American community who would otherwise be kind of pushed to the side or buried under statistics. I think from my experience, I did an AP research project about this very topic and the stereotypes specifically that South Asian individuals face and how they can be perpetuated by social media. And I had found a lot of statistics that backed up my research question that I was really trying to answer with my study this year. But I think that was what was most impactful was actually the individual stories that I came to find throughout my research, most namely in our community. Recently, a couple years ago, there was actually a very violent instance of bullying and abuse faced by a middle schooler, like a South Asian middle schooler in our community. And I think learning about that really helped me to kind of like realize why I was doing this research in the first place. And it was for all these stories that go kind of buried or unnoticed. And so I think that these individual stories being told is really important to like really help highlight the struggles that the Asian American community might face that, again, might otherwise be completely, like many people might otherwise be completely oblivious to.
Yeah, to kind of touch on that as well. I think obviously seeing all of these statistics, it can be really easy to get bogged down on the specific numbers or the specific percentages of all of these, like specifically Asian American communities. But the thing is, it's like when it's just a statistic, you're really only seeing a number, and it can be kind of hard to visualize all of the people that are actually being impacted by said problem. And so storytelling really helps ground the story in reality. You know, these are real people just like yourself in different communities that are maybe just have a different skin tone, but they're still facing these same inequities. And so it definitely helps humanize the issue.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was going to say. I think that facts and statistics can be very informative and very helpful, but at the end of the day, it's the real people that are experiencing these things, and I think that storytelling creates this sort of emotional aspect that facts and statistics can't do, and through that we can build more empathy and more real understanding about people with experiences different from ours.
Thank you. And we know that emotional safety and mutual respect is important for people to feel that they can share their stories. So I'm going to start the next question off with David. Can you share and talk to me about what are some of the conditions or the people teachers, mentors, friends? What are some of those conditions, and how can people hearing those stories help you feel valued and supported?
Sure. So there's definitely many resources around everywhere in our schools that can help us in all of our, whether it's the problem that we have, whether it's a problem that we have or something that we need to address. So I think whether it's a psychologist that you trust or a teacher that you trust in your school, anyone really can help you with one of the, let's say it's an inequity or something that you feel like needs to be addressed. I think there's many resources and all of us would have to address them.
And then hello. Okay. In my personal experience, I have not really reached out to much in the school, but I would say outside my community, I have a group of South Asian family friends that I've been really close with and in touch with. They've always grown up here in Connecticut, and it was like I had a built-in family along with mine. And that was a great experience, just having a group of people that have shared the same experiences as me, and I could talk to them about basically anything I was going through. So having a community that you can lean on and just having one person at least that you can just talk to about anything is really what you need in life. And I think that that's why we're making this documentary and this moment. It's really important for people to feel understood and find a place where they can really belong.
Yeah, I think for me, even though it can be very valuable and feel great to have someone who I relate to a lot, I find it really helpful to seek out the opinions of people that maybe have perspectives that are drastically different from mine. And I think that being able to, or having the trust and the mutual understanding between me and my friends or mentors, people like that who I know will give me a different way of viewing things without casting judgment or kind of negating the way that I feel is really valuable. And I love to hear different perspectives and different ways that people see things.
Yeah, I think specifically within my own school at Farmington, we have a lot of emphasis around like social justice awareness. We have a lot of social justice clubs at our school, and that, for me at least, helps me find a community within like vast parts of my identity. Obviously, like you're not just confined to like one specific race, ethnicity, gender. There's so many different complex parts about you that are intersect with each other, and I think that's one thing that my school does really well in terms of prioritizing that and finding different ways to connect with those individuals, which again, by seeing all the different like facets of your identity, you're able to get those different perspectives, but also have a similar relating experience with other individuals, which really helps validate your experience.
I definitely agree with the fact that clubs and organizations can be really helpful to provide that sort of support. Here at Simsbury High School, I'm a part of our newly formed Asian Nation Club, and we have had quite a few meetings where we just kind of celebrate Asian culture. We had like a Chinese New Year meeting, we had a Holy meeting, and in those meetings, we take the time to learn about the cultural practices associated with these different Asian communities, and we sample their food. And I think that a lot of just these organizations that exist to expose people to different aspects of culture that they might not have previously been aware of can provide support to people who might not see that culture necessarily represented in other aspects of their experience here in high school. So I definitely think that people seeking support can definitely turn to a lot of these clubs and organizations to experience that.
Thank you. And I think you've each touched on it a bit in terms of what we should have in our schools. So I want to ask, from your perspective, what are other ways and the best authentic ways schools can create opportunities for you to celebrate diversity, equity, and inclusion? And I'll start with David.
So I think from an example in my life, we've had a few events at our high school. Like we have a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Week that we've had to more raise awareness and provide inclusion for students of color and students who feel like they can be included with these groups. So I think that's a great way that we've tried at Simsbury High School to push for that. And I also think that even talking to students around you about these things can help as well. Whether it's one of your classmates or someone you don't even know, I think pushing for more awareness for all of these different topics is definitely a good way to do that.
Yeah, and when I was doing I was a facilitator for the Students Color Alliance kind of like focus group that we were doing during the documentary process. And it was a great way for me to understand what was happening inside my own school. And hearing students talk about some things that they were going through really shocked me, because I never really heard about the little struggles that were happening and the little stereotypes that were being put on these students. So one student commented that he was a freshman, and he would want a student mentor that would help guide him through maybe the first 2 years of high school. They could tell about their experiences, maybe some teachers or just some resources they could reach out to, because he never knew about Students of Color Alliance before a student came up to him and told him about it. So finding these student resources that could help these new students overcome challenges would be really great. And I'm so glad that we have Students of Color Alliance in so many different equity clubs, like David mentioned. And I think that it'll be really amazing if we had any student mentors that could really be helpful.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. I think that really schools can help by promoting these clubs and events like this one, where people are able to get together and share their authentic experiences, see things like the documentary, which I think can be so enlightening, whether you have experience with Asian American culture or not, and just overall promoting an inclusive environment and opportunities where students can get together and have real, genuine conversations.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that there's kind of a misconception within education that a lot of efforts regarding DEI have to be grand gestures, like they have to be something like big, like a whole week of presentations, something like that. But the thing that I found with a lot of these types of events is that they're on opt-in basis. So the students who are interested in them get involved in them. But that, again, is just a small population of students in the overall student body. And I think that more like everyday gestures within including equity and inclusion within schools, whether that's your school curriculum, putting in a couple back specifically like within history classes, for example, that show multiple different racial groups or perspectives, that really gets all students involved, regardless of if you have to go to a specific event, if you have to take time out of your day to attend a club, but more so within the everyday school climate is really what will help kind of combat the ignorance within stereotypes, because every student is kind of forced to be exposed to them.
I definitely agree. I was actually going to say the curriculum thing. I think that at Simsbury High School specifically, we have classes like the Asian American Studies class that allow students to learn more about these experiences in this community in depth. But again, these are opt-in classes. It's not like they're a part of really the main curriculum of a lot of classes that every student will be pretty much not quite forced, but every student will take and every student will see. So I definitely think that implementing literature and more instances of the history of these communities in English and history classes would be also very important to facilitating this understanding in the entire student body instead of just groups that are particularly interested.
Thank you. So, Kriti, you mentioned about the groups that are participating and being in our clubs. But oftentimes when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, the misconception is that it's good for people from underrepresented groups, but it's really good for everyone. So I'm going to ask, what are some ways or some things that you think we should be doing to make sure that it is inclusive, that everyone understands that a sense of belonging, and this work is important for everyone, not just people of color? Would like to take that question. And this was not a question that they've prepared. Many of the questions weren't. So would anyone like to answer that question? Thank you. And then Maya.
So I think this question really speaks to why this documentary is important in the first place. It highlights Asian Americans feeling invisible, like we saw in our first section. But I think now we see there's a whole group of people that have so many different stories and backgrounds here. And it's important for them to realize that this is not just about Asians, this is about every group and every kind of story that's out there. That even if you feel that your story is represented now, it can be taken away. And I think that's important that we all realize that that can happen to anybody and any person. So being here today and being able to see this documentary really come into light and show people that we're all the same, really, and we all have similar experiences is really important, and showcasing why representation really matters.
I agree. I think that to avoid the sense of invisibility in the first place, representation is really important to be seen by everyone rather than just the group that is being represented. Because when these issues are brought to light and a wide variety of perspectives begin to accept this information, I think that it's really important for really everyone to accept and process this. To then maybe potentially change the biases that might be ingrained in them, whether intentionally or not, to sort of combat this invisibility and take action to prevent Asian Americans or really any other group from feeling excluded or ostracized.
Really good. And now I want to take a couple of questions from the audience. And forgive me if I misquote, but I'm going to try to paraphrase some of the questions. So one is, do you think discrimination against AAPI members has decreased since COVID? And what other type of data should we be looking at?
Well, discrimination towards Asian Americans was definitely at a pretty high peak during the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't think that it's decreased a ton, unfortunately. From my experience with my research, I found that any global event that involves Asian Americans to any capacity allows these stereotypes to return to the mainstream. And with my research specifically focusing on South Asians, one of the trends that I noticed very recently was even last year when Zohran Mamdani was running for mayor of New York City, we saw this huge spike in anti-South Asian slurs being used online. So I think that while the COVID-19 pandemic was definitely a huge and unfortunate instance of racism, that racism doesn't necessarily go away or really dwindle too much, unfortunately, because really any global event involving Asian American people can allow this racism to unfortunately perpetuate in a lot of communities.
Yeah, kind of to add on to that, I think that throughout history, as a society, we have a big history of scapegoating. And so I think that's definitely one of the biggest things that happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, that people who were upset and vulnerable about the whole pandemic needed someone to blame. And so it can be really easy to just try and to just try and blame the first person, that the most easiest assumption towards that. And so I think that definitely has caused discrimination against AAPI communities to definitely increase after the COVID pandemic, because it didn't just stop there. Obviously, there's a ton of violence towards that community, again, just because people needed someone to blame. When I think the greater message about humanity is that in times of crisis and in times of need, it's more important to lean on each other instead of pitting against each other.
Thank you. And that really leads to another question from the audience. What actions can be taken to stop the normalization of racism towards South Asians?
So I think that just goes back to why this documentary is really important, because it really showcases our main mission for this is called Make Us Count. It is just to showcase why these numbers are important and why we haven't been seeing any representation for these communities. And it really puts that perspective out there to a bunch of different students and so many different people in the community that this is a real problem. And by putting this out there into people's minds, it really ties into the stigma that's what's happening in the real world. And it really gets people talking, and it really just speaks to what's happening in the real world.
I also think that a big thing is a see something, say something mindset, because in our communities, many a times, even me personally, I've seen extradition or blatant racism towards many people of many different races. But I think that a big thing that can help combat that I haven't seen as much, is action taken against those acts of racism. And I think that specifically is one of the biggest things that can help put an end to that.
I definitely agree with that piece. I think that taking action is really important, because the danger of normalization of racism and discrimination is that when it continues to happen, then people almost become desensitized to it, and they stop seeing it necessarily as something, as a problem, and more so as something that might just be a fact of life. And I think that that's really dangerous. And so taking action, whether it could be something small, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a grand gesture or something that you're uncomfortable with doing, but making an effort to not condone or kind of be a bystander when you see something that is racist or makes you uncomfortable is really important, and can make a really big difference when we all commit to that.
Yeah, I think on that note too, especially within, I think, our generation and like social media, there's a lot more normalization of jokes against racism, whether that's from the people of color themselves making jokes about themselves, or other people hearing that and thinking that it's fine. And I think that's a really sensitive line to be around, because while people may be making jokes, it definitely makes people think that, oh, like, now it's like normalized, I was just kidding, stuff like that. But I think that, again, is really dangerous in itself, because that promotes even more normalization, especially through social media, which is super widespread and definitely impacts a lot of people. And so I think discrimination definitely starts from addressing the smaller things, like was said by other members of the panel, because that smaller moments kind of add up to a greater societal understanding against racism.
Adding on to that, I think that to kind of combat this early stage of even implementing these ideas that could be potentially racist from social media in people's minds, I think that media literacy is really important to combat this, and really taking the time to consume everything you see on social media from a very like nuanced and critical standpoint. So that way you're not accepting the sort of racism that you see so widespread on social media as a fact, because when you accept it as a fact or reality, that is when those instances of racism start to happen. So I think that if you look at everything you see from a nuanced and critical perspective, then you might not internalize as much racism towards these communities as you otherwise might.
Thank you. And as a panel, you've really given us some actions that we can take. So everyone in the audience, thank you for hearing all of those actions. And I hope that you all become upstanders and not normalize racism. So my final question for the panel, and for those of you who will be remaining with us throughout the day, I'm sure that you will have other questions and have great conversations. But I want to end on the note of hope. There's something we can do. We've talked about it. We're bringing awareness, and we have actions, but we also have hope. So my question is, for each of you up here, what is one message of hope that you hope the audience will take away from today's program? One message of hope.
I think the message of hope, really just like all of us sitting here being at this presentation, one of the things that I love most about this upcoming generation is that we're not afraid to speak up against topics that were once incredibly stigmatized within society. Being here talking about AAPI discrimination and racism is definitely a super controversial and charged topic that a lot of people definitely wouldn't be comfortable, one, speaking about, but also listening about and coming to a presentation about it. And so I think looking at all of the people in this room, that gives me personally hope for addressing the future and future problems of racism and discrimination, because there's so many other people like you who share the same concerns about where our society is going. And that definitely is something to look on when you feel a moment of despair.
I think my biggest takeaway from this was that everyone's stories deserves the chance to be brought to light. And I think that I really hope that this resonates with a lot of people, and it might bring light to something that they might not have seen before really represented in school or within young people, because again, it's quite controversial to talk about something like this. So I really hope that everyone here walks away from here knowing that people are trying to make an effort to bring these issues to light and not continue to cast them aside. And yeah.
Yeah, going off what my panelists said, I think that my biggest takeaway has been realizing the power of stories and the power that they can hold in shaping our future. I think that seeing things like this documentary has really shown me a wide variety of perspectives, and I think that when, as a school, as a community, and even as individuals, when we commit to hearing other people's stories and sharing our own, that can be really powerful and allow us to make a real change in the future.
Two more. Just quickly, two more.
Okay. I think my biggest takeaway is probably kind of broad, but it's love is a verb. I think that's my biggest statement for this year. And just you all being here, it really shows that your love and compassion for something like this is really powerful. And by just being here, you've shown that you've appreciated the AAPI community and what's happening. So that's why I think really you being here is just a showcase of how much you care about this issue.
Yeah, building off of that, I also think that you being here goes to show that you have other people around you that you can talk to and communicate with about anything that you might be wondering about. And I think you can look to the person to your left or to your right and think that you have other people to share ideas with, or anything that you might be wondering, or anything that might be concerning you, that there are other people there to support you.
Thank you. Please give our panel a round of applause.
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town,
bringing us together through local programming,
education, and live broadcasts.
SCM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community,
ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings,
and celebrating milestones
like our high school graduations.
But today, SCM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions, and it's no secret people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SCM receives less revenue,
even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open,
continues to educate our youth,
and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SCM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive
for generations to come.
Visit our website
or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution
counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media,
where your town,
your schools,
and your government come together.